Your handwriting is terrible. Yang leaned back on her mattress, arms crossed behind her head. On the bed beside her lay her partner, her nose buried in yet another book. At the end of the cramped room, on one of the two large desks, sat their leader, Jean, and his partner. Though at this point, the distinction of whether she was his partner or his slave driver was in the air. No one can read this. Write it again. No. Jean-Arc whined. One hand reached out as pieces of torn paper sprinkled down before him. Couldn't you have at least let me copy it before ripping it up? Well. Weiss looked away, clearly having not thought of that. This should help you memorize the material. It is not enough to go through the motions of homework. You must learn and absorb it. That sounded like a weak excuse, even to her. But she watched the unfolding drama with barely concealed glee. There was nothing better than a real-life soap opera. It was still a shame no one had taken her idea of bunk beds seriously, with Weiss shooting it down and Jean commenting that it sounded like too much work. Even her own partner had just shrugged. That was probably why she felt he deserved to put up with Weiss's badgering. It definitely wasn't because she found it entertaining as hell. No way. It had been particularly funny in the first day, when Weiss still held onto some misplaced belief that he would try his best to put an effort to learn from her. It had taken 24 hours for the girl's optimism to shrivel up and die, and then the frustrated anger had come out, and that was when it had become a good feeling. We only got this homework today. Jean sighed. This is like the first week. It's not required until next Monday. I was going to do it this weekend. Weiss planted both hands down on the table, the girl hovering over him as she fixed a baleful expression onto the unfortunate man. Fool me once, shame on me. She snarled. You already missed out on Professor Port's homework yesterday. I won't let you trick me again. He doesn't even take in the homework he sets. He literally forgot he had ever said it. Nobody did his homework. Yeah, well, I did it. Weiss crossed her arm. And so did Yang and Blake. The two girls in question shared a brief look over the top of Blake's novel. The raised bow her partner gave suggested she might have done the same thing Yang had and just sketched some random words down. He was right though. The teacher hadn't asked for it in, so neither of them had gotten in any trouble. It was only 4 days into Beacon, and already Yang had started to figure out some of the classes and teachers. Like the fact that Port liked to talk about his own adventures in every lesson and that, much like Jean had said, he didn't actually collect or mark the homework he set. Professor Oblock, on the other hand, very much the opposite. That was what Jean was working on now. Doesn't the saying go, fool me twice, shame on you? There will be no second time. Less talking, more writing. Those two are a real laugh, eh? Yang rolled over, turning in such a way that she lay on her side looking directly towards Blake. The girl twitched, ever-present bow in place as she answered without even looking away from her novel. It was a laugh the first 3 times. This is becoming old. Oh, don't be such a sourpuss. Yang laughed, catching the narrowed eyes but thinking nothing of it. It's like an old married couple. Weiss is the mother nagging the father to get a better paid job, and the two of us are their children. If he was my husband, then I'd poison his drink. Weiss snarled, apparently having heard her comment. If she were my wife, I'd drink it. See? Old married couple. Yang turned to Blake with a grin, watching but listening as Weiss spluttered and ranted at him, as though it was somehow unfair or disgusting of him to say that, even when she had mentioned poisoning him. Those two are a real riot. Yeah, I'm in stitches. Blake turned another page, voice deadpan. Lilac eyes turned to slits. Jeez, the team could be a real nightmare at times. Wish I could have been on Ruby's team. They look a lot more fun. Or rather, Nora did. Still. Even if Kira was a bit overly polite and Ren was a bit, well, overly polite, Nora and Ruby were enough to bring a little life to the squad. Instead, I get a bookworm, an overachiever, and the laziest idiot on Remnant. Is this karma for all the puns? I knew I shouldn't have trusted Uncle Crow on that. What you reading? Yang asked instead, going with her usual approach to sparking friendship. It was an odd plan, where she liked to get in their faces and be bothersome enough that they had to accept her. But it hadn't really failed her yet. Blake sighed, but answered. It's the man with the 2 souls. 2. 2 souls? 2? Like, 22 souls? That sounds pretty complicated. No. Like, 2 souls. The second book in the series. A sequel. Digging words out of Blake was like squeezing water from a rock. The man with 4 souls? Question mark? The voice of their leader came from the writing desk, where he was lazily scribbling something down onto a piece of paper. Wyatt sat on the desk beside him, legs and arm crossed with a ruler in hand. Yes? Blake answered uncertainly. She still seemed off around the guy, like she wasn't quite sure what he would say or do. Just another reason for Yang to feel awkward in the room that should have been her solace. That's not a bad book. It's the one where the protagonist is torn by the indecisions of the 4 souls, ultimately succumbing to the madness and killing his love interest before realizing what he has done and sacrificing his own life to seal the souls away. I like that ending. Blake twitched violently. I hadn't finished the book. She whispered, the voice barely audible. Even so, Yang felt the desire to scoot a little further back in her bed. Alright. Jean didn't look back. Spoiler warning, I guess. It's a little late for that. Yang's thoughts were a little hysterical as she watched her partner's fingers turn white as she gripped the cover of her book. With an almost reluctant finality, she pushed it down atop the dresser, retracting her hand and crossing them over her chest. Blake Belladonna could have redefined the word pout with her current expression. You know, you could keep reading, Yang tried to offer, laughing nervously when furious golden eyes turned on her. Blake huffed. Now that I think about it, I finished this homework in class, but has Yang even started it? Excuse me, Zhao Long? Weiss locked on like a laser-guided missile, even as Yan fixed a filthy look on her partner. What are you waiting for? Get up here and start running your own as well. We're running out of time. Traitor. She whispered towards her partner, pulling herself up with the reluctance of a person walking to their execution. Sure, she could have argued, but what was the point? The work had to be done at some point, and an argument was only going to make it worse. Misery loves company. Jean whispered as she sat down, flashing him an irritated look. Daddy, she cooed, holding both hands before her chest. Mummy's being mean. Can't I skip homework this time? Weiss splattered angrily, but Jean simply turned to face her, expression serious. Sure. A second later, his face was pushed down, impacting the desk as Weiss's hand settled on the back of his skull. Her normally pale face was red, eyes narrowed. No, you cannot, and do not call me your mother, and you! Don't encourage her madness. He replied into the pages. If you get spit on that, you're writing a new one. She threw her hands into the air. I don't see how the two of you could be so biased about this. These are the grades that are gonna determine your success in life. You fell asleep in Port's class, yesterday, again. In my defense, and I think it's a pretty good defense, you were pretty much the only person who didn't fall asleep. Yang had to admit, he had a point there. She'd been out like a light, and though she was fairly sure Blake had stayed awake, it was only to finish the homework and read a book. Well, how about history class? Professor Oplock asked you a question and you got it completely wrong. In front of the entire class, might I add? Hey, he asked me what caused General Le Guin's loss at Fort Castle. He wasn't technically wrong. Blake chipped in, leaning over for a new book and turning the page. Stupidity was not the correct answer. Every mistake made by mankind can be chalked up to stupidity. And that's what makes it such a good answer. Weiss sighed. The general underestimated his foes due to the lack of understanding on the capabilities of those he faced. He lacked information. A lack of intelligence, Jean said. In other words, stupidity. If you phrase it like that, then you probably wouldn't be a laughing stock among the students right now. The heiress gripped her hair in both hands, but wisely chose not to tug. After your forfeit in combat class, and now this? It's a wonder more people aren't bullying you on the halls. In fact, it's only the performance of the rest of us that has prevented you from being the target. Whoa. Wait. Jean leaned back in his chair, genuinely confused. I'm being bullied? You didn't even notice? Weiss growled. She did that a lot lately. How could you not notice that people keep laughing and talking about you? Probably because I don't care enough to listen to them. He scratched his nose at that, the sheer apathy in his voice drawing a little giggle from Yang. Should I? Well, no. But what about Carden? Who? The guy you surrendered to in that fight. Weiss had one hand against her face. Oh, him. Wait, is he bullying me? Yang coughed, drawing attention to her as she put her pencil back down. Her eyes rolled towards the ceiling a little, as she recalled the events of just the previous day. Remember after history class, when he held out his leg to trip you? Jean's eyes widened. Oh yeah, I walked straight into his leg and ended up knocking him into the door frame. Do you think I should apologize? How about the time he fired a spitball at you in Peach's class? Yang tried another occasion. Didn't that hit Weiss? The white-haired girl growled in fury at the memory. No doubt Carden still shivered whenever he thought about it. In an attempt to keep the room descending into chaos, Yang chose not to mention how he'd only hit Weiss because Jean had gone from being fast asleep to suddenly sitting straight up, effectively dodging the shot at the last second, leaving his partner open. Well, how about when he stood up in the middle of the cafeteria and proclaimed that you're a man who likes to hide behind women and make them do the fighting for you? Well, he's technically not wrong. Would you be offended if someone called you a blonde? Yang sighed. He wasn't supposed to be proud of that fact, nor accepting it as nothing more than an accurate description. I think you're all overreacting. I mean, if he really wanted to bully me, then surely he could just hit me or something. The three of them could only stare at him, no doubt each of them remembering the events of just yesterday, when Carden had finally lost his cool and made to attack Jean. The blonde had simply blinked and walked away, not even noticing as the other teen's fist missed his face by an inch and impacted the wall. Carden certainly noticed, if the way he cradled his hand was any indication. Winchester's lack of skill at bullying is no excuse for you for being bullied, Weiss announced, putting the argument to rest. Whether or not you realize it, whether or not the idiot even knows how to do it, people are trying to bully you. This is bad. Is it though? It is bad, Weiss proclaimed, placing emphasis on the word as she glared at him. Jean wisely kept his mouth shut. As such, we need to help boost your image within Beacon, and the best way to do that is book smarts and achievement. If you are the best in class, then there's no way you'll get bullied. You were private schooled, weren't you? Jean asked. By the best in Atlas, Weiss nodded proudly. It shows. Thank you. Weiss curtsied at what she no doubt perceived a compliment. Yang grinned and got back to her homework, wondering what other fireworks would come. The heiress had the right idea, but perhaps not the experience. His reputation was already gone, and becoming the teacher's pet would just make it worse. Ruby had gone through something similar, but she had the benefit of a kick-ass older sister to put fear into the bullies. And in time, Ruby had shown exactly what she was made of. He could do the same, she considered as they both scrolled away. There was no real conversation now. just the scratching of pen on paper interposed with the occasional hum from Weiss as she looked over what they had written. She, Yang Xiaolong, had trashed Cardin Winchester. It hadn't even been a fair fight as much as a massacre, especially since she'd been angry at the words he'd thrown around. That was to be expected. She was a badass melee combatant. All the instructions at Signal had said so, though many using different words than badass. That had been all her uncle. Either way, she'd been the top at Signal, and while it was too early to say where she was in Beacon, she was confident it would be in the top 10% or so. And Jean had fought her unarmed. Okay, she'd been unarmed too, but the point still remained. Between a person who used the sword and one who used fist-based weapons, if they were both unarmed, she had the biggest advantage. He lost his entire style of combat, while she had only lost a bit of striking power, and the use of her shotgun blast. It hadn't been a fair fight, all the more reason for her to feel guilty over it, all the more reason why she should have won. He'd fought her, and he hadn't been creamed. It was more of a brawl than a real fight, she had to admit. From what she could tell, he'd been hammered for one, and she hadn't exactly been prepared for it either, but he had fought more than well enough. Well enough to make her concerned. Well enough to make her draw her weapon in the heat of the moment. Was he a pacifist? Like, one of those martial arts masters in the movies where he suffered some great loss as a child prodigy but sealed his strength away behind a wall of ironclad discipline? Except, under the influence of alcohol, his emotions came forth, unleashing his power upon her. Jean-Arc yawned, eyes closing for a second before Weiss slapped the ruler against the back of his head. The sudden impact made him jerk, waking up in an instant and causing him to lurch back so violently he fell off his chair. Okay, maybe not a hermit martial arts master. She really needed to cut down on watching movies on her scroll before bed. 4 days, or only 3 really, if you consider initiation as the first day, and 3 days since, but still. They had been on a team for 3.5 days and she still felt no closer to understanding him. Blake and Weiss were easier, at least in a sense. Yang wouldn't dare believe she knew everything there was to know about either of them, but the basics were there. Blake liked peace and quiet and enjoyed reading. She was a smart girl but also had a vicious streak hidden behind her words at times. Yang liked that, and made verbal sparring with her all the more exciting. Weiss, on the other hand, was an overachiever, someone determined to be the best and as such would make sure her team was also the best. She was also spoiled, proud, and arrogant, but not cruel about any of it. It was more like she was a naive bitch than an actual bitch, which made it easier to bear. Naivety would wear off, given time. The thing with Weiss was that she genuinely thought she was helping with this whole forced homework thing. Their leader, though. It wasn't that he was hard to get a grip on, lazy, sarcastic, a bit dopey. Yang had a faint suspicion he might also suffer from narcolepsy, because some of the places and times he could fall asleep went beyond laziness. It was hard to fall asleep in the middle of a conversation with Weiss, even harder when her volume quickly spiked from 8 to 1000. Either way, it was easy to get a read on him, or a first impression, and that should have been enough for her, and it would have been, were it not for the inconsistencies. He was rude and antisocial, ignoring them at random moments and generally refusing to even give them the time of day. But he put up with Ruby. That had been the first sign to her, especially since she'd been ready to step in at any moment to protect her little sister. Why oh why the shy and nervous girl had chosen him of all people to befriend? She had no idea. Why not someone 1,000 times easier, who actually responded to people or looked like he was paying the slightest attention? It should have been impossible, and yet, it happened. Ruby chatted with him inconsistently, just about every time she could. Yang didn't think she'd ever heard him give a proper response, at least not more than a yes, no, or a grunt that might have been counted for words if she were a caveman. But he'd also never flat out ignored or shooed her away either. Her little sister, as adorable as she was, could be over-enthusiastic at times, and the way she monopolized the conversation with him was a prime example. Yet, he let her get away with it, when he absolutely didn't have to. His combat ability was another thing, but that could be explained away. He hadn't actually fought yet, so while he had been able to drunkenly brawl with her, it might make sense that he wasn't confident in his skills against someone like Winchester. It was silly, but maybe he just thought the bigger man was too strong. Or maybe he was just an aggressive drunk. It wasn't like their fight had been filled with extreme technique. She could still remember him headbutting her in the face. It was his personality which confused her the most. However, if she had to wonder if she was the only person who saw it, Jean-Arc was lazy, uncaring, and slow. The kind of guy who talked like he was fighting back a yawn and who you could trust to be the last to finish just about anything. He might put up with Ruby, but he definitely didn't seem to care about anyone. That clashed immediately with what she had seen and heard in the police station. She'd only been present for the conversation between the headmaster and he, but it had been time enough to see a different side of him, one that was sharp, angry, and emotional. He'd accused, he'd pushed and fought, he had argued with the headmaster of Beacon Academy. She could even remember him sticking up for her, saying how she wasn't at fault. That person just didn't mesh with this person, and that contradiction was almost agonizing how much confusion it caused her. It would be like Ruby suddenly turned around and explained that she was a sex-craved psycho who wanted to rule over Beacon with an iron fist and an elect harem. Not impossible, but so unlikely that Yang wasn't going to start worrying about her virtue anytime soon. Mother, I feel our daughter is developing an Electra complex. Don't call me mother. Wise slammed the ruler down on his head once more, producing a mighty crack. Yang, stop staring at him. You're beginning to creep me out as well. Lost in thought. Yang shrugged. She wasn't one to feel embarrassed at being caught. What? Did you try to count to 5? She spared a smirk to the man beside her as Wise hit him again. Smart ass as he may be, he wasn't particularly smart if he hadn't realized what the girl's response to that would be. There. Done. Ow! Why? Automatic reflex. Wise had the decency to cough as she placed down the ruler and accepted his homework, scanning over it with an experienced eye. She hummed, tilting her head to the side and frowned. After a few seconds, however, she let it drop with a sigh. Possible. I'll let it go this once, but I'll expect better in the future. Here. Yang sighed and handed her own over, getting a raised brow above the pages. It's pretty much perfect. Yang rolled her eyes. Did Wise have to sound so surprised? When your father and uncle are teachers, you don't get an excuse for a poor report card. Say what you would about the two of them. And there was a lot to say about Crow being drunk in lessons, but Tai Yang and Crow were not the kind of people to accept anything but the best from their students. Being a family member didn't make it any easier, and to think, some of her old friends had complained that she must have had it easy. What a joke. Well, you finished just in time for lunch too, Wise pointed out, checking her scroll and seeing it would be 5 minutes until the bell rang. Beacon had a number of free periods through the day, since being a hunter wasn't something that required an abundance of varied lessons. Things like politics and herbs came in the upper years, but for the first years it was more important that they had free time to hone their skills and fitness. And to think, just the other day, I had laughed and planned how awesome it would be to goof off during said free periods. Damn Wise. Damn treacherous Blake. The halls of Beacon teemed with students. Some in uniforms, and others in combat dress. It all depended on the year and timetable, but they all moved as one towards the cafeteria, hungry beyond belief. Being a first year again, it was a strange feeling, especially after she'd once been the undeniable top dog of Signal. It was honestly a shock to see people look at their team and laugh, and for some to even go as far as to wink at their leader, shoulders clashing against his. He didn't budge, however, which brought a satisfied grin to her lips. If they expected him to fall over, then they were sorely disappointed. He just walked through them with the same kind of blank expression he always wore, not once noticing the teasing, not once realizing that some people staggered after knocking into him. No one dared to harass the remaining three, not since she'd made such short work of Carden. Do you think he does it on purpose? Yang whispered, trusting her partner to hear. Blake's yellow eyes narrowed. A short sigh slipped from her lips. No, I don't think he's intentionally defending himself. It's not that he squares his muscles or takes a better stance. He simply walks through. Yang hummed, even as she agreed with the comment. As a fighter, she was used to readying minute movements, or at least she knew the theory behind it. It wasn't the kind of skill anyone truly mastered, but she was experienced enough to know that he wasn't preparing himself for each person. Yang! Ruby called as they entered the cafeteria. Over here! Jean groaned and made the move to a different table, but Yang's hand snapped out to grab his shoulder with ease, dragging him along with the team as they went to sit with Team Ruben. Hey sis! She greeted as she forced her leader down into an empty seat. The rest of the team each took a seat on the long table, opposite their counterparts from what was fast becoming their sister team. Well, that was literal in her case. Thanks for saving us seats. Yo Nora, you looking after my baby sister? Of course. The orange-haired girl scoffed, reaching across the table to bump fists with her. Just this morning, I made sure she had a healthy breakfast of pancakes, syrup, and cookies. That was not exactly what she would have called a healthy breakfast. But then again, it probably had more nutrients than just cookies. Ruby would have just chosen on her own. Good enough. Yang grinned down at her own tray packed with high meat and vegetables. A lifestyle like hers burned calories off at a crazy rate. That being almost literal if she activated her semblance. That said, she still needed to make sure she got plenty of protein to keep her toned muscles. Heh. And who said eating healthy is hard? So, you come up with any new ideas for a team name? It was Pyrrha who spoke, a small smile on her face as she brought up what seemed to be a daily discussion for the team. Weiss and Yang groaned, shaking their heads. Have you considered just using the letters? Blake didn't look up from her book. Like JBWY? I was thinking a little more abbreviated. Pyrrha didn't take any offense, or rather if she did, she kept it well hidden. Perhaps just 2 letters. Team JB? Weiss winced. Weiss fits the image. Jean replied, only to go silent as a butter knife planted itself between his thumb and forefinger. It vibrated gently, buried a full inch into the wood. I don't think those letters work well in either order. Weiss dabbed her lips with a napkin. Nor do the others combine to make anything that sounds less foolish than what we already have. I believe the problem here is Blake, since her initials are the same. My profound apologies, Your Highness. Blake turned another page in her book. We could always marry her off. Yang grinned as she felt Blake's eyes leave the page and lock onto the back of her neck. She could just imagine how frigid those eyes were. Truly, the partner had the best reactions to teasing. Do you think it would be easier if she was married to Jean or Ren? Neither works well. Perhaps an N? Great. Pyrrha, you want to marry Blake? I do? Great. Nora and Ruby were stifling their giggles as Pyrrha's green eyes widened in alarm. No, wait. I didn't mean it like that. Ow! A loud voice cried out in pain, disrupting the conversation. The light mood died in an instant, as a scene that played out just the previous day occurred once more. Please, don't. It hurts. See, I told you guys they were real. Cardin Winchester laughed to one of his teammates. It's damn weird. You can feel how warm they are. What a freak. His cronies laughed as did a few others nearby. Yang sighed, good mood forgotten as she balanced one elbow on the table, chin slumping into her hand. He's at it again? Weiss rubbed the bridge of her nose. Looks like it's not just Jean he's trying to pick on. Perhaps he's gone for a target who shows more of a response. He rubs me the wrong way. Pyrrha agreed, munching on a stick of celery with more force than was strictly necessary. What's worse is how everyone else laughs along, like it's normal. It is normal. Blake turned another page, but Yang could see the frustration in that simple act, the speed of which she did it, the lack of delicate care and attention she paid to her beloved tomes. Faunus are used to putting up with things like this. Yang sighed. It's disgusting. A voice practically seethed from her left. Such was the animosity in those words that the blonde felt the hair on the back of her neck prickle. She wasn't the only one, it seemed, as the eyes widened and utensils slowly lowered to the table. As one, they all turned to look at the blonde man who had been so quiet. He was frowning down at the half-eaten chicken wing in his hand. With a worn-out sigh, he placed it down and pushed the plate away. So disgusting. I've had better meals straight out the microwave. Of course you're talking about the food. Why sigh and raised a hand to cover her face? How foolish of me to think you were actually interacting with the world around you. Her eyes narrowed behind her fingers. You are going to eat more, right? We have another sparring class this afternoon, and I want you to do some training before then. I'll be fine on what I've had. You've had half a chicken wing and the smallest portion of salad I've ever seen. Where's the protein, the vitamins and minerals? Why sighed, the sigh of someone who had given up any hope of the person she was speaking to actually giving an intelligent response. Instead, she leaned over and started to push some vegetables off of her plate, spilling them onto his. I'm sorry, are you my wife or my mother? I'm neither. A carrot ricocheted off his forehead. Stop saying that. Ruby caught Yang's eye across the table, but she mouthed a quick "don't ask" in response. I wish someone would go do something about Carden though. Pyrrha drew the conversation back to the matter at hand, leaving Weiss to try and force more food down Jean's throat. It's bad enough that he tries to lord it over the other first years, but something like this? It's none of our business. Yang frowned at Blake for that, even if it wasn't strictly untrue. Then, whose business is it? Ruby asked, silver eyes hard. The girl being bullied? Carden's? Or is it just the responsibility of the heir itself to do something? No doubt Ruby recalled from her own early years in Signal, where she'd been the source of bullying for not being the same as her big sister. Even now, the thought of it had Yang's fist clenching. Another cry from a distressed Faunus didn't do anything to calm her emotions. If we intervene, then things will become far worse for her. We can't look out for her every second of every day, and interference will only make him treat her all the worse when we're not there. Blake sighed and put the book down on the table. Sometimes it's best to just accept what is. He'll get bored once he realizes there's no real response. Was it her imagination? Or had the leader's eyes strayed to Blake at that statement, narrowing just the tiniest bit? It's her lot in life to accept abuse like that. All eyes on the table snapped to the blonde teen who had spoken. He pushed his plate away with a short sigh. After all, she's just a Faunus. If she doesn't want to deal with it, she can always go work in the Schnee mines. Yang swallowed, as she felt the temperature around the table drop. It wasn't just Blake who glared at him, but Weiss and the rest of Team Ruby too. How dare! Blake began, only to go silent as a pair of blue eyes fixed on her. Isn't that what you just said? Sometimes it's better just to accept what is? Hey now. Yang leaned between them, trying to break line of sight. Let's not argue over dinner. Blake leaned forward, however, pushing Yang back. I didn't mean it like that. The abuse the humans heap upon the Faunus is obscene. You wouldn't even mention those mines if you knew what went on in there. Weiss shuffled uncertainly. She looked like she wanted to speak, to defend her family name, but at the same time was afraid to. It was the first time Yang had seen her look so stricken. And yet, here we are, sitting back as one as tormented. He didn't sound angry. If anything, he sounded bored. one finger poking distractedly at his scroll. An interesting way to show how much you care. Blake's fingers clenched around her utensils, knuckles white as bone. And what about you? I don't see you doing anything. That's because I don't care. Yang winced at the way he said it. Her eyes strayed to their sister team in time to see the dark look Pyrrha sent him, along with disappointment expression from Nora and Ren. Her little sister looked frightened, like a young girl watching her parents argue, who had no idea whether things would ever be the same afterwards. Should I care about someone I don't know? Yes! Blake almost snarled. We're hunters in training, Jean. Ruby's voice was quiet, as the girl reached across the table to lay 2 fingers on his arm. Her sister seemed hesitant, as though worried what his response might be. It isn't right for us to sit back and watch injustice happen. Isn't that what we were just doing? He rolled his eyes. Fine. Yang, go punch Carden in the face. Me? Yang splattered, a few droplets of grape juice spraying from her lips. When did I become a part of this? Initiation, I think. He rubbed his chin as she fought back a groan. I didn't mean the team. Why do I have to be the one to go sock him? Because I can't be bothered? Because I said so? Dealer's choice, I suppose. Fine. She sighed and pushed the chair back, already cracking her fist. It wasn't like she didn't want to go up there and stop this. Plus, now she had the perfect excuse. If anyone asked her why or tried to get her in trouble, and she could just say her leader ordered her to do it. It wouldn't get her out of trouble, but it would be migrated a little. Worth it to stomp someone like him. You made a mistake in reminding me of Ruby getting bullied, bucko. The rest of the table watched as Yang stomped off. Not one of them missed the dangerous gleam in her eye, nor the tiny grin on her face. See? Problem solved. Jean clapped his hands together, like a man brushing off the accumulated dust of a hard day's work. That level of apathy isn't something to be proud of. Pyrrha broke the silence, green eyes stern as she locked a fierce glower onto him. Nora's forcing someone else to handle the matter because you were too lazy. There was a cry in the background, no doubt from Yang having reached her prey. None of them even bothered to look, since the result was a foregone conclusion. Funny. And here I thought this is what you all wanted. Someone stepped in to do something. Blake's eyes narrowed, but she didn't quite meet his eye. Ruby's face too became scrunched up, a war between conflicting emotions that threatened to break free. When Nora and I were young, we once met a young boy. Ruby's gaze turned to her teammate, who had leaned forward to rest both elbows on the table. He wasn't able to stand by as 2 complete strangers were bullied, even though outnumbered and with someone of his own to protect. He stepped in to help them, at no benefit to himself. Nora looked sad as Ren spoke, the normally bubbly girl picking at her meal. Sometimes I wonder what happened to him. Maybe he grew up. Jean shrugged. Or maybe he developed breasts and grew his hair out. Maybe he's up there right now defending that girl. I'm not sure why you're asking me. I'm not sure either. Ren shook his head, but would say no more. Ruby could only let out a small, distressed whine.